Okay, so today's daf yomi is Kiddushin daf Samach Bey is Kiddushin 62, and so the Gemara is challenging there's a dispute going on between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Hanina ben Gamliel. So the Gemara says, meaning to say Rabbi Meir says that you need to have every Tanai, every stipulation in the Torah needs to be doubled, and if it wouldn't be doubled, it's not going to be valid. And we learned that out from the sons of Reuben God, from their conversation with Moshe Rabbeinu. But Chanina Gamliel says we can't learn that out from that. So the Gemara says, because if it wasn't doubled, we wouldn't have known the opposite way. So the Gemara says it makes sense according to Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, who says that it needed to say it like that. It needed to do the full expression by Bnei Reuben and Bnei Gad. And that's the reason, that's why it states with respect to a sota who drinks the bitter waters, that the Kohen says to him, shachav ishotach, you have to drink this water that no man has slept with you, satit tuma tachat ishech, and if you have not gone astray, hinaki, you will be clean of sin. What we see from here, El Rabbi Meir, but according to Rabbi Meir, it says that you need to clarify both sides. If that's the case, chimkimi balei, it should say that if you drink this, you will be found innocent. But if you don't drink this, you'll be strangled. So why does, according to Rabbi Meir, not say that by the sota woman? So I'm Rabbi Tanchon hina kiksiv. It's written without the yud. Hina not. So it's written as hinaki without a yud, and that's to teach us that we're supposed to darish in this word and to tell us as though it's written chinki, and so therefore it's saying if you drink it, you'll be innocent, and if you drink it and you're not innocent, then you'll have the strangulation. So the Gemara says Bishlam and Rabbi Meir. That makes sense according to Rabbi Meir. Hainu Dosef hinaki. That's why it states hinaki. Ella, but according to Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, according to Rabbi Hanina ben Gamliel, why does it state this? So the Gemara explains, I'll tell you why it needs to say this. You might have thought, ish, hinaki. You might have thought that if a man doesn't, if you had not lay with a man, you will be innocent. But if you did lie with a man, you won't be innocent, but you won't get the punishment of chemek. Would just be a regular prohibition. Kamash Malan, we say that we're not going to say that case. And that's why according to Rabbi Meir, it has to say hinaki. Bishlam Rabbi Meir makes sense. Another attempt. It makes sense according to Rabbi Meir that's why it states that when you put the ashes of the red heifer on you, you'll be cleansed on day 3, and on day 7, yitar v'imlo yislata, and if you don't do the ashes on day 3 and day 7, you will not be purified. Means to say, it needs to say it both for that reason. But according to Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, it says otherwise it doesn't need to say. You would have known it. Why to say on day 3 and day 7? So the Gemara explains, I'll tell you why. You might have thought mitzvah hazah b'shlishi u'b'shvi, that the ideal mitzvah is to sprinkle it on day 3 and day 7. But where he just does it on one of them, it's going to be okay b'di'evid, even though you don't get the full mitzvah. Kamashma, we don't say that. Mara says, well, if that's the case, since we're talking about the sprinkling of the ashes of the rat heifer, why does it need to say this? It's already said this earlier in the verse. Mara says, I'll tell you why it needs to say it. It's true. You might have thought, it says on day 3 to say you can't do it on day 2. It says on day 7 to exclude day 6. So, because what you're doing is you're diminishing your days of ritual purification. But if you do it on day 3 and day 8, I might think the kamafish b'mei tahara, where you're adding on your days of tahara. I might have said ema shapir dami. I might have said that it's good. Kamashram, we say that that's not good. So Gemara says v'chito b'yom hashvi'i, that if you purify yourself on day 7, why is that repeated? We already learned that out. It already says b'yom hashlishi b'yom hashvi'i. Gemara says Itzrach. I'll tell you why it needs to say it. You might have thought, when do we need to say on day 3 and day 7? Only to eat kachem of a truma. But if a kohen wants to eat truma, Ema b'chad nami sagi. I might have said but I might have said that you don't need both sprinklings. Only on one is sufficient. Kamash Malon. So we say that's not what we say. We say even for truma, we're going to require this. So now the Gemara starts to the Mishnah on Daf Samach Beis. So what says the Mishnah? Hamikadesh es Isha, that if a person wants to betroth a woman, va'amar, he says Kasavar Ayiti Shehi Kohenes, and he says, I thought she was a daughter of a Kohen. Varehi Leviah, she's a daughter of a Leviah, or Leviah Varei Kohenes, she's a daughter of a Levite. I thought, and she's a Kohenes. Ania Varei Ashira, I thought she was poor and she's rich. Ashira Varei Ania, I thought she was rich and she's poor. Harezu Mikudeshes, we're going to say she's betrothed because he's not the one who confused her. She confused herself. Meaning to say, we're going to say under these circumstances, he's not the one. She never made this claim to him. He is the one who made it on himself. She didn't mislead him, and so therefore she's going to be betrothed to him because she never said anything. But if it says to the woman, he says, I'm going to be betrothed to you after I convert or after you convert. After I'm freed or you're freed. After your husband dies or after your sister dies, because a man can't marry a woman and her sister while the sister is alive, even after he divorces her. But after she dies, he can. It's the only heir which becomes permitted. Or he says, or after you have chalitza done to you, she's not going to be betrothed. So too somebody says to his friend, So to somebody who says to his friend, Im yalda ishtacha nikeva harezu mekudeshes. If somebody says to his friend, if your wife will give birth to a girl, you will be this harezu mekudeshes. Somebody says to his friend, if your wife will give birth to a girl, let her therefore that girl become betrothed to me. We're going to say she's not going to become betrothed under those circumstances because this girl wasn't born yet, and so therefore it's invalid. Meaning you'd say even if it becomes a girl, she's not born, she's not going to be betrothed to him. So the next case we take out. So the Gemara says, Tanan Asam, we learned over there. Where do we learn? We learned in the Mishnah in Trumos that it says the following: Ein torma min hatolish al mechubar. Now you're not allowed to take a truma from the produce that was removed and say it should count for the ones that's still connected. Vim taram, and if you did it, ain't truma so truma, then it's not a valid truma. So ba'minei Ravasi me Rabbi Yochanan. So Ravasi says he asks a question from Rabbi Yochanan. He says, let's say he says the following. Let's say he says peros. Let's say he says peros arugazu tushimiu truma al peros arugazu mechubarim. Let's say he says the following. He says let the fruits of this row that has been removed become the truma for this row that is still connected. Or if he says peros arugazu mechubarim, you truma al peros arugazu tulushim. Or if he says this row of fruits is still connected, should become a truma for this fruits that are removed. So when the fruit is actually picked, vinitlashu mahu. So under those cases, he says it'll take effect when the fruits were removed, and then later on it is picked. What's the law? And Rabbi Yochanan said, in that case, since he has the ability to pick it, it's not like it's missing in action, and so therefore it's going to be a valid truma. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, we're going to challenge you from our Mishnah, because after I convert or after you convert, she's not betrothed. The other one, in all these cases, it's not in his concern. But a person does have the ability to convert. A person does have the ability. So the Gemara, so why isn't that considered biyado, that it's in his possession? So the Gemara explains as follows: Gernami la biyado. No, converting is not under his control. This is unfortunately all too sad. We know this from today. From so many people want to convert, but they're not able. The Amar Rabbi Abba Bar Rabbi Chibar Abba Rabbi Yochanan Ger Tzarach Shlosha, that a convert needs 3 people. What's the reason? he needs a court of three to help him convert. What's the reason? My time up mishpach sivbe, because it says that you require judgment, which means kedin. Then it has to be like a court of three, because a bezin it says mishpach sivbe, because it says about by a convert it says the word mishpat, and so therefore it requires a bezin of three. So the Gemara says, and mi yemer the miskaka klei hani tosa. How does he know he's going to get a bezin of three? So I'm asking for Rav Avi Bar Mama. Well, if that's the case, only ata. I know saying. So again, Rabbi Yochanan's principle, as long as it's in his as long as it's in his ability, we're going to say it's a valid Kiddushin. So Rav Avi Bar Mama challenges, if that's the case, I know some pruta shifchaso the Amar. Someone who gives a pruta to a shifcha and he says, "You're betrothed to me after I free you." Hachinami dav Kiddushin. You want to say that in this case it's going to be a betrothal because he has the ability to release her. The Gemara says, "Hachi hashta." That's not the same case. It's a different comparison. Hasamikar behema hasha das acheres. At first, she was a slave, but now she's a totally different person. So therefore, since she's of an adult, she now becomes eligible, and so therefore, even Rabbi Yochanan would agree that if it's a completely different change of person, it's not going to be valid. Gemara says, "Well, Rav Oshaya. What about the following case?" I know saying pruto ishto, someone who gives a pruto to his wife, and he says, excuse me, you're betrothed to me after I divorce you. It doesn't work. In Mekudeshes. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it should be a valid Kiddushin. Mar says, no, it's not biyado. Need to biyado l'gersha. It's in his hand to divorce her, but biyado l'karcho, but it's not going to be in his ability to betroth her, because just on his own doing, because she has to accept it. Gemara says, "Tiv to buy Rav Oshaya." Well, let's answer a different question on the basis of this logic that Rav Oshaya said. I'm not saying shtei prutos l'isha. Let's say a person gives two prutos to a woman, but achas amar was gachli ayom. One of them he says, "Become betrothed to me today." Achas amar is gachli la'achar shagar sheikh. And the other one he says to her, "Become betrothed to me after I divorce you." Tiv shomina do avi kiddushin. So let's say that under these circumstances, it's not a valid betrothal. It's not a valid betrothal, because since he's saying, "Become betrothed to me after I divorce you," she might not accept it. So Gemara says, no. No, maybe that case it would be a question. Why? Because maybe in that case, just like Kiddushin can take effect now, Tafsik Nami Achar can take effect later. So in Tanya Kavasi to Rabbi Yochanan asks, there's a brayso that's like Rabbi Yochanan. We're not going to take a tithe from something that's removed on something that's connected to the ground. But if he does it, it's not valid. Ketzad. What's the case? It's the brayso. Amar Peros. Let's say he says these fruits. This fruits will be a truma on these fruits that are connected, or and this fruits that are connected will be a truma for these fruits that are removed. He said nothing. But if he says, look, but if it will take effect once it's removed, it's valid. And so this is exactly like the position of Rabbi Yochanan. And yes, okay, even if he says these fruits that are Telushin will be a truma on these fruits that are connected, or Paris Rugazum Truma Paris Telushin, when they grow a third, Rabbi Ben Yaakov says even if it's not yet a third grown, we could assume that it will grow. So he says it only with crops that are like fodder, because when it comes to fodder, it's really something of significance of a ba'agam, but if they're still in the earlier stages, low. And Rav Yossi says afilu ba'agam. So now the Gemara says, well, how do we know that agam means in its earlier stages? My mashma da'ai agam lishman debutzal nahu. How do we know it means it's an early stage of it growing? Rabbi Lazar damakra halachof ba'agamon rosho. Is it to bow his head like a agmon? Come on, also Adatanya, like who knows the following price ago? If your daughter gives birth to if your wife gives birth to a female, she'll be betrothed to me. that counts for nothing. Like, who is that like? That only works when his wife is not pregnant. But if his wife was pregnant at the time, come on. So who's that like? If it would be, you want to say like Rabba, that means the baby needs to be at least recognizable. If it's like Rav Yosef, even if it's not yet recognizable, it's still she's like in the Agam stage, it's going to work. Alternatively, he says if I fodder the bay kivsha, which it's in a field which relies on rainwater, of bashachas the bay shakya, if it's growing in irrigation, low. Then we're going to say it doesn't apply because maybe he's not going to irrigate the crops. But when they are like rain, we know, well, Rav Yosef says, I feel b'shachas today shakya. And according to that approach, Kaman Azal Haditanya, Omer Chaver, Am Yod Shulchan Hakim, Mekudesh, Sliwa, Omer Kon, Omer Chanina, Lashana, Lashain, Nishtam, Beres, and Lichum, Beres, Farf, Yamin. So we'll say, Kaman Kashukar, Ubra, Divrei Hakol. It's like it needs to be recognizable, and even Rav Yosef would require that. Okay, we'll stop here. Yashakoach, a good Shabbos, and we'll repeat this stuff. You only God willing on Shabbos Kodesh. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos.